Behind the glittering premieres and perfectly posed photographs, Golden Age Hollywood marriages crumbled in spectacular fashion, leaving destroyed careers, ruined fortunes, and shattered lives in their wake. The studio system that manufactured these dream couples couldn't save them from the toxic reality of their relationships. These unions weren't just failed marriages. They were explosive disasters that played out in courtrooms, headlines, and sometimes tragedy. From violent confrontations to public humiliations that destroyed careers overnight, these marriages reveal the dark price of fame when love turns to hatred. 1. Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner. The volatile marriage between the crooner and the Hollywood goddess became the most destructive relationship in entertainment history, leaving both stars emotionally shattered and professionally damaged. When they married in 1951, Sinatra was at the lowest point of his career, while Gardner was ascending to superstardom, creating a toxic dynamic fueled by jealousy and insecurity. Their fights were legendary. Gardner once threw a champagne bottle at Sinatra's head during a party at Darryl Zanuck's home, missing him by inches and shattering a mirror. On another occasion, Sinatra fired a gun into the mattress while Gardner was in bed, claiming he was testing if she truly loved him. The marriage deteriorated into a nightmare of mutual destruction. Gardner would deliberately flirt with her leading men to provoke Sinatra's rage, while he retaliated by having very public affairs with other women. Their worst confrontation occurred in 1953, when Sinatra attempted to end his life in their Lake Tahoe home, after Gardner announced she was leaving him for a bullfighter. MGM executives had to pay off local police and doctors to keep the incident quiet. The couple's favorite game was emotional torture. Gardner would call Sinatra from her lovers' beds, while he would send her recordings of love songs with altered lyrics describing her betrayals. 2. Joan Crawford and Franchot. This marriage transformed from Hollywood romance to psychological warfare that nearly destroyed both stars' sanity. Crawford, already establishing her reputation as a control-obsessed perfectionist, met her match in Tone's intellectual superiority complex and violent temper. Their 1935 wedding was a studio-orchestrated fairy tale, but within months, servants were fleeing their home with stories of furniture destroying fights and Crawford locking Tone out of their bedroom for days. The marriage became a competition of cruelty. Crawford would publicly humiliate Tone by discussing his inadequacies with reporters, while he would disappear for weeks with other women, leaving her to explain his absence at premieres. The end came explosively in 1939, when Tone discovered Crawford's affair with Clark Gable had resumed. He confronted her at a Hollywood party, and their screaming match ended with Crawford striking him with a champagne bottle. The divorce proceedings revealed allegations of physical confrontations, with Crawford claiming Tone had destroyed her entire wardrobe in rage, while he accused her of monitoring his every movement through private detectives. The settlement cost Crawford a fortune, but she considered it worth escaping what she later called 4 years of sophisticated torture. 3. Mickey Rooney and Ava Gardner. Before her catastrophic marriage to Sinatra, Gardner endured a humiliating first marriage to Mickey Rooney that lasted just 1 year, but left permanent scars on both stars. When they married in 1942, Rooney was the biggest box office draw in America, while Gardner was an unknown starlet, and he never let her forget it. Rooney's treatment of Gardner was so degrading that MGM executives intervened multiple times, with Louis B. Mayer personally warning Rooney about his behavior. He would introduce Gardner at parties as my latest conquest, and openly discuss their intimate life with anyone who would listen, while forbidding her from taking speaking roles because he feared she would overshadow him. The marriage reached its nadir when Gardner discovered Rooney had gambled away their entire savings and borrowed against her future earnings without her knowledge. When she confronted him, he laughed and told her she should be grateful he'd married her at all. The final straw came when Gardner found Rooney in their bed with another woman, and he had the audacity to ask her to join them. She filed for divorce the next day, but Rooney made the proceedings as painful as possible, claiming in court that Gardner was mentally unstable and incapable of being a proper wife. The divorce devastated Gardner's reputation before her career had even begun, while Rooney simply moved on to his next marriage as if nothing had happened. 4. Bette Davis and William Grant Sherry. Davis's third marriage to artist William Grant Sherry descended into violence and terror that nearly cost the actress her life and career. Sherry, an unsuccessful painter who resented living in Davis's shadow, began their marriage in 1945 with promises of supporting her career, but quickly revealed a pathological jealousy of her success. He would destroy her scripts, sabotage her communication with studios, and once locked her in their home for 3 days to prevent her from attending a premiere. Davis later revealed that Sherry would force her to tell studio executives she was ill, while he stood behind her with threatening gestures. The marriage exploded in 1949 when Sherry attacked Davis in front of their young daughter, throwing her down a flight of stairs and leaving her with injuries that required weeks of recovery. Warner Brothers had to shut down production on her film and create elaborate explanations for her absence. The divorce proceedings exposed Sherry's campaign of terror. He had hidden recording devices throughout their home, hired people to follow Davis, and even attempted to poison her beloved dogs. Davis won custody of their daughter, but paid Sherry a massive settlement to ensure his silence about the marriage. She later said those 4 years aged her 20. 5. Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles. The marriage between the love goddess and the theatrical genius became a masterclass in psychological manipulation that left Hayworth emotionally destroyed. Welles married Hayworth in 1943, when she was Columbia's biggest star, but he immediately set about dismantling her identity. He forced her to cut and dye her famous red hair for his film The Lady from Shanghai, deliberately sabotaging her image to prove his control over her. Welles would humiliate Hayworth at dinner parties by discussing her lack of education, making her read Shakespeare aloud so guests could laugh at her mistakes. He convinced her she was stupid, talentless, and only valuable for her looks, while simultaneously criticizing every aspect of her appearance. The marriage's darkest period came when Welles began using Hayworth's fame to finance his failing theatrical projects, forging her signature on contracts and spending her earnings without permission. When she discovered he'd lost over $300,000 of her money on a failed Broadway show, he convinced her it was her fault for not being supportive enough. Columbia executives tried to intervene, but Welles threatened to expose studio secrets if they interfered. The final blow came when Hayworth found Welles had been conducting multiple affairs throughout their marriage, including with her own stand-in. Their 1947 divorce left Hayworth so traumatized that she never fully recovered, later saying Welles had murdered the person I thought I was. 6. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor. Behind their picture-perfect facade as Hollywood's ideal couple lay a marriage of convenience that turned into mutual imprisonment and resentment. MGM orchestrated their 1939 wedding to quiet, persistent rumors about both stars' personal lives. But what began as a business arrangement evolved into psychological warfare. Taylor resented being forced into marriage and punished Stanwyck with calculated coldness, refusing to speak to her for days and maintaining separate bedrooms from their wedding night. Stanwyck retaliated by having affairs with her leading men and ensuring Taylor knew about each one. She would leave love letters where he would find them and invite her lovers to dinner parties at their home. The marriage reached its cruelest point when Stanwyck desperately wanted children, but Taylor refused, later revealing he had undergone a medical procedure to ensure it would never happen. When Stanwyck discovered this betrayal after years of trying, She destroyed Taylor's prized gun collection and burned his wardrobe in their backyard. Their public appearances became performances of hatred. Photographers captured them literally turning away from each other the moment cameras stopped rolling. The 1951 divorce proceedings were sealed, but insiders revealed both stars had documented years of emotional abuse, with Taylor claiming Stanwyck had threatened his life multiple times while she accused him of systematic psychological torture designed to drive her insane. 7. Clark Gable and Lady Sylvia Ashley. Gable's fourth marriage to British socialite. Lady Sylvia Ashley became a carnival of greed and humiliation that nearly destroyed the king of Hollywood's final years. Ashley, who had previously been married to Douglas Fairbanks, saw Gable as her ticket back to luxury after squandering her previous fortune. From their 1949 wedding night, she began systematically alienating Gable from his friends and controlling every aspect of his life. She redecorated his ranch house in garish British aristocratic style against his wishes, fired his longtime staff, and intercepted his mail to filter out any communication she deemed threatening to her position. Gable's friends reported that Ashley would lock him out of his own home when he displeased her, forcing the legendary star to sleep in his car. The marriage became unbearable when Ashley began selling Gable's personal belongings and memorabilia from his marriage to Carole Lombard, knowing these items were sacred to him. She auctioned off Lombard's jewelry and clothes, telling buyers they were getting pieces of Hollywood history. When Gable discovered what she'd done, their confrontation was so violent that neighbors called the police. Ashley then attempted to have Gable declared mentally incompetent to gain control of his finances, hiring doctors to testify about his declining mental state. The scheme failed when MGM intervened with their own medical experts. Their 1951 divorce cost Gable a fortune, but he considered it cheap to escape what he called 20 months in prison with a warden and pearls. 8. Gloria Swanson and Wallace Beery. This 1916 marriage between two future superstars became Hollywood's first truly toxic celebrity union, setting the template for marital disasters to come. Beery, who later cultivated a lovable screen persona, was a monster in private who subjected Swanson to treatment so appalling that she attempted to escape multiple times. On their wedding night, Beery got intoxicated and revealed he had only married her as part of a bet with other actors about who could conquer her first. Oh, he would lock Swanson in their home for days, disconnect the telephone, and tell studios she was ill while he went on gambling binges with her earnings. Swanson later revealed that Beery would force her to entertain his friends in degrading ways, treating her like property rather than a wife. The marriage ended after just 3 weeks when Swanson fled to her mother's home following a particularly terrifying incident. Beery had lost a significant amount of money gambling and tried to force Swanson to sign a contract essentially selling her to a producer to cover his debts. When she refused, the confrontation became physical, and Swanson barely escaped. The divorce was granted quickly and quietly, with the judge sealing the records after hearing Swanson's testimony. For decades, both stars maintained public silence about their brief marriage, but Swanson's posthumously published memoirs revealed the full horror of those 3 weeks. 9. Lana Turner and Artie Shaw. The screen goddess's marriage to bandleader Artie Shaw lasted only 4 months in 1940, but inflicted psychological damage that haunted Turner for decades. Shaw, who collected wives like trophies, married Turner on their first date in Las Vegas, then immediately began his campaign to improve her. He forced Turner to read books he selected and quizzed her on them at dinner parties, deliberately choosing complex philosophical texts to humiliate her in front of his intellectual friends. Shaw banned her from wearing makeup at home, calling her pathetically shallow for caring about appearance, while simultaneously criticizing her natural looks. He would time her phone conversations with her mother and friends, cutting the line if she exceeded his arbitrary limits. The marriage's most devastating aspect was Shaw's systematic destruction of Turner's self-worth. He told her daily that she was barely human, just a beautiful object that studios marketed, and that no intelligent person could ever truly love her. When Turner was nominated for an award, Shaw laughed and said the only award she deserved was Best Decorated Mannequin. The breaking point came when Turner discovered Shaw had been documenting their marriage in a journal he planned to publish as a study of the vapid Hollywood female. She filed for divorce immediately, but Shaw released excerpts to gossip columnists anyway. Turner required years of therapy to recover from those 4 months, later saying Shaw had murdered something inside me that took years to resurrect. 10. Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. America's sweetheart and the swashbuckling hero created Hollywood's first royal marriage. But behind the gates of Pickfair Mansion, their union devolved into a prison of jealousy and control. Fairbanks, initially supportive of Pickford's career, became pathologically possessive after their 1920 marriage. He hired detectives to follow her to sets, had her dressing room bugged, and once caused production to shut down when he accused her leading man of looking at her inappropriately. Pickford retaliated by spending lavishly on projects Fairbanks opposed, including purchasing an entire studio without telling him. Their dinner parties became legendary for the wrong reasons. Guests reported watching the couple communicate entirely through cutting remarks disguised as jokes. The marriage's toxicity peaked when Fairbanks's infidelities became flagrant, including an affair with a woman young enough to be his daughter. Instead of divorcing, Pickford began her own affair with her leading man, Buddy Rogers, ensuring Fairbanks would discover them together. Their final years together were spent in separate wings of Pickfair, communicating only through servants. When they finally divorced in 1936, Fairbanks was already dying, and Pickford refused to visit him, saying, "He killed our love long before his body gave up." 11. Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio. The marriage between the blonde bombshell and the baseball legend lasted only 9 months, but left both stars emotionally scarred, and DiMaggio obsessed until his death. DiMaggio expected Monroe to abandon her career and become a traditional housewife, flying into jealous rages when she appeared in public. The infamous 7-year Itch subway great scene triggered DiMaggio's most violent outburst. He beat Monroe so severely in their hotel room that she required makeup artists to work for hours covering bruises for her next day's filming. Witnesses reported hearing Monroe's screams and furniture breaking, but the hotel staff had been paid to ignore any disturbances from their suite. DiMaggio's control extended to every aspect of Monroe's life. He monitored her phone calls, read her mail, and hired private detectives to follow her even when they were together. When Monroe was filming, DiMaggio would appear on set and create scenes if her costume was too revealing or her scenes too intimate. 20th Century Fox executives had to ban him from productions after he physically attacked a director who was positioning Monroe for a shot. The marriage ended when Monroe fled to a lawyer's office with only the clothes on her back, terrified for her life. Yet DiMaggio's obsession continued for decades. He had her phones tapped, stalked her other relationships, and even manipulated his way into controlling her funeral arrangements, banning many of her closest friends from attending. 12. Judy Garland and David Rose. Before her more famous troubled marriages, Garland's first union to composer David Rose was a carefully orchestrated disaster that MGM used to control their teenage star. The studio forced 17-year-old Garland to marry Rose in 1941 to end her relationship with Artie Shaw, but Rose was essentially hired by MGM to be her handler. He reported her every movement to studio executives, controlled her medications on their instructions, and isolated her from anyone who might support her independence. Rose would deliberately increase or withhold her prescribed pills depending on studio needs, causing devastating withdrawals or dangerous highs that left Garland completely dependent on him for basic functioning. The marriage's darkest secret, hidden for decades, was that when Garland became pregnant, Rose and MGM executives forced her to undergo a procedure to terminate the pregnancy, telling her a baby would destroy her career. Garland desperately wanted the child, but Rose held her down while studio doctors performed the procedure in their home. She never forgave him, and their remaining months together were spent in mutual hatred. Rose would publicly humiliate Garland by flirting with other women at premieres while she stood beside him. When they divorced in 1944, MGM paid Rose handsomely for his services and his silence, while Garland was already being prepared for her next studio-arranged marriage. 13. Elizabeth Taylor and Nicky Hilton. Taylor's first marriage at 18 to hotel heir Conrad Nicky Hilton Jr. lasted only 8 months, but introduced her to a pattern of marital violence that would haunt her relationships. Hilton, a violent alcoholic with a gambling addiction, transformed from charming suitor to brutal husband on their honeymoon. During their European voyage, Hilton lost tens of thousands of dollars gambling and blamed Taylor, destroying their suite and leaving her with bruises she had to hide from photographers. He would disappear for days with other women, then return and accuse Taylor of being unfaithful. MGM executives received frantic calls from Taylor begging for help, but they initially told her to try harder to make the marriage work for publicity purposes. The abuse escalated when they returned to Los Angeles, where Hilton's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would invite his gambling associates to their home and offer Taylor as entertainment, forcing her to serve drinks while enduring their crude comments. When she was filming, Hilton would show up intoxicated and create scenes, once throwing a bottle at her co-star for standing too close. The marriage ended when Taylor suffered a miscarriage after a particularly violent incident, though MGM covered it up as exhaustion. The studio finally arranged for a quick divorce in 1951, paying Hilton a substantial sum to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Taylor later revealed that Hilton had kicked her in the stomach during a fight, causing the miscarriage, but she was forbidden from mentioning it during divorce proceedings. 14. Carole Lombard and William Powell. Before her legendary romance with Clark Gable, Lombard endured a sophisticated form of psychological torture during her marriage to the suave William Powell. Powell, 16 years older and infinitely more sophisticated, married Lombard in 1931 when she was just 22 and systematically set about molding her into his ideal woman. He criticized everything about her. Her laugh was too loud, her jokes too crude, her friends too common. Powell would host elaborate dinner parties where he would deliberately set up Lombard to fail, asking her opinion on obscure topics he knew she couldn't discuss, then apologizing to guests for his wife's limitations. The marriage became a nightmare of constant criticism disguised as improvement. Powell hired tutors to refine Lombard's speech and deportment, but would mock her efforts in front of others. He controlled her wardrobe, her social circle, and even her film choices, telling studio executives which roles were beneath his wife. The breaking point came when Lombard discovered Powell had been having an affair with a socialite throughout their marriage, choosing a woman who represented everything he'd tried to force Lombard to become. Their 1933 divorce was remarkably civil in public, but privately Lombard told friends that Powell had tried to murder everything genuine about me. 15. Ginger Rogers and Lou Ayres. The dancing star's marriage to her leading man became a battlefield of professional jealousy that destroyed both their careers at RKO. When they married in 1934, Ayres was the bigger star. But as Rogers' fame eclipsed his, he began sabotaging her career in increasingly desperate ways. He would call studio executives pretending to be Rogers' doctor, claiming she was too ill to work, then book himself for the same shooting dates. During their film, Don't Bet on Love, Ayres deliberately ruined takes of Rogers' solo scenes by making noise off camera or accidentally walking into frame. The director finally banned him from the set, but Ayres retaliated by spreading rumors that Rogers was difficult to work with and mentally unstable. The marriage reached its most toxic point when Ayres intercepted a telegram offering Rogers the lead in a major production and declined it on her behalf without telling her. When she discovered this months later, after the role had made another actress a star, their confrontation resulted in Ayres attempting to strangle her. Rogers' mother, who lived with them, intervened and called the police, but RKO executives arrived first and covered up the incident. The studio was so concerned about the marriage destroying their investment in Rogers that they essentially paid Ayres to agree to a divorce in 1940. He received a settlement and guaranteed film roles in exchange for his cooperation. Rogers later said she spent years rebuilding her reputation from the damage Ayres had inflicted, while he never recovered from losing his meal ticket. 16. Frances Farmer and Leif Erikson. This marriage between two rising stars became a descent into madness that ended with Farmer's institutionalization and destroyed career. Erikson, consumed by jealousy of Farmer's superior talent and fame, began their 1936 marriage with subtle undermining that escalated to outright destruction. He would hide her scripts, delete callback messages, and once burned her entire wardrobe the night before a major premiere, forcing her to miss the event. When Farmer began showing signs of distress from his psychological torture, Erikson convinced others she was having a mental breakdown, carefully documenting her reactions to his provocations as evidence of instability. The marriage's most sinister aspect was Erikson's collaboration with Farmer's mother to have her committed. He provided testimony about her erratic behavior while concealing his role in causing it. When Farmer tried to leave him in 1942, Erikson and her mother had her forcibly institutionalized, where she endured years of horrific treatment. Erikson quickly remarried and used his tragic first marriage to gain sympathy and roles, while Farmer's career was destroyed. Documents discovered decades later revealed Erikson had been paid by rival actresses to remove Farmer from competition, making him not just an abusive husband, but a hired saboteur. 17. Jean Harlow and Paul Byrne. The Platinum Blonde's marriage to MGM executive Paul Byrne lasted only 2 months before ending in tragedy, but those 8 weeks contained horrors that MGM spent millions covering up. Byrne, 22 years older than Harlow, had presented himself as a sophisticated protector, but their wedding night revealed a disturbing reality. Byrne flew into a rage when unable to consummate the marriage, beating Harlow so severely she missed 3 days of filming. MGM's fixers doctored photos and created elaborate explanations for her absence, while studio doctors treated her injuries in secret. Byrne's violence escalated rapidly. He would bite Harlow during his rages, leaving marks makeup artists struggled to conceal, and once held her at gunpoint for hours while ranting about his inadequacies. The marriage ended when Byrne was found dead in their home in September 1932, just 2 months after their wedding. While ruled self-inflicted, Harlow's private statements, sealed for decades, suggested a different story. She revealed Byrne had been increasingly unstable, threatening to kill them both if she tried to leave. On the final night, there had been a violent struggle that ended with the gunshot. MGM executives arrived before police, removed evidence, and coached Harlow on her statement. They paid off investigators and created a narrative about Byrne's impotence and depression to explain his death. The cover-up was so thorough that the truth remained hidden until FBI files were declassified decades later, revealing MGM had spent the equivalent of $10 million today protecting their star and studio from scandal. 18. Ronald Reagan and Jane Wyman. Hollywood's all-American couple's divorce shocked the nation, but the real reasons were buried under carefully crafted publicity. Wyman, the more successful actor, grew to despise Reagan's political obsessions and intellectual pretensions. He would force dinner guests to listen to hours-long political speeches, while Wyman served drinks like hired help. Reagan treated their home as a political salon, but expected Wyman to remain silent because he believed actors shouldn't have political opinions, except himself, of course. When Wyman won her Oscar in 1949, Reagan's congratulations came with a lecture about not letting success go to her head, followed by a demand she turn down future roles to support his nascent political career. The marriage's breaking point came when Wyman lost a child, and Reagan showed more concern about how it affected his image than her grief. He scheduled campaign events during what should have been her recovery, telling supporters his wife was too emotional to appear. Wyman filed for divorce in 1948, citing mental cruelty, but sealed documents revealed Reagan had been conducting affairs with young Republican activists while publicly promoting family values. He tried to destroy Wyman's career through his political connections, spreading rumors about her mental stability. Wyman remained professionally silent about the marriage until her death, but her private papers revealed Reagan as a narcissist who saw everyone, including his wife, as props in his political ambition. These Golden Age Hollywood marriages remind us that beneath the glamour and glitz, fame and fortune couldn't buy happiness or heal damaged souls. The studio system that created these dream couples also trapped them in nightmares they couldn't escape. From violent confrontations to systematic psychological torture, these toxic unions left permanent scars on some of cinema's brightest stars. The price of fame in Hollywood's golden era often meant sacrificing personal happiness for public image. Which of these disastrous marriages shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below.